Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 1 of Apple TV's Silo, entitled Freedom Day. So this show is created by Graham Yost. He was the showrunner and creator of Justified, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. You couple that with how Apple is kind of crushing the sci-fi game right now, and I was definitely gonna at least give this show a try. I fully expected to like it, given all of those things, but definitely willing to give it a try. Before I get started, though, I want to talk about my coverage plan real quick, and I also want to point out that this is going to be a non-spoilery video. I am going to talk plot details, but like not very broad plot details. I'm not going to get into any like serious stuff, so don't worry. You're not going to get spoiled here. You're going to learn far less about the show details-wise than you would reading a review of in Variety or something like that. But this is going to be the only non-spoiler video. I intend on doing full coverage of this show. I will be watching episode 2 at some point this weekend, maybe even tonight, and I will get a video up, a full spoiler-filled in-depth review of episode 2 at some point next week, and then I will pick up full coverage on Friday with episode 3. So that's the plan long-term for this for covering the show, and the plan for this video, with this one being the only non-spoiler one. So let's talk about this first episode. And before I get into the plot details that I told you I'm only going to speak about broadly, so again, you're not going to get spoiled, let's talk about who all is in this, because there's a lot of interesting and established people involved. I've already talked about Graham Yost being the creator and showrunner. That's a guy I respect immensely. Like I said, Justified, one of my all-time favorite shows. In this first episode, we have David Oyelowo. We know him from Selma. He played Martin Luther King. He plays the main character, at least the main character in this episode, Sheriff Holston. And Rashida Jones plays his wife. We know Rashida Jones from Parks and Rec, The Office. We know Rashida Jones from a million things. She plays his wife, Allison. Holston is the sheriff within the silo. Pretty obvious, given that I called him Sheriff Holston. And the episode opens with him locking himself in a jail cell for reasons we will come to learn throughout the course of the episode. His partner, who I don't think has a title that's spoken in the episode, so I'm just going to call him Assistant Sheriff. He's played by Will Patton. Will Patton I saw most recently, or you all might have seen most recently, on Outer Range on Amazon. Josh Brolin's show. I covered it on this channel. He was most recently in that. I've always been kind of a bit squeamish about Will Patton, and it's nothing, not a knock against his ability at all whatsoever. And if Will Patton, if you see what I'm about to say, I'm going to apologize to you up front. But I feel like Will Patton has a very natural resting racist face. So I always kind of squirm when I see him, because he looks like the kind of guy who's been casually using the N-word for several decades. So I kind of feel like I don't like this guy. But he's been good in everything I've seen him in. So I don't know how big of a role he's going to be playing. I don't know how big of a role everyone who was in this episode is going to be playing, because there's a 2-year time jump at the end. So like it kind of feels like a lot of these characters we're not going to see again, but like they're not dead or anything. So I don't know. But I feel like a lot of the characters who we've seen in like promotional material and the trailers that are, I'm assuming, going to be fairly prominent on the show, we don't see in this first episode. Like I'm gonna run off a couple. So like the promotional material, like I said, it features some big name actors we don't see in this first episode. Rebecca Ferguson, who I know most recently from Dune. She played mother/wife Atreides, Oscar Isaac's wife, and Timothy Chalamet's mother, the leader of the Bene Gesserit. I remember Bene Gesserit, but I can't remember her fucking name. But she was apparently in a lot of the recent Mission Impossible movies as well, more than one. I haven't seen any of the Mission Impossible movies. Surprise, surprise. I know that's going to shock a lot of you guys. I want to see them. That's very much my lane. I just never got around to it. But she is supposedly the lead. She's featured prominently on all of the promotional material, but we don't see her until the very last scene of the first episode. So I don't know what she's going to be up to, but she's not featured, but she is very prominent in the promotional material. IMDb also lists Tim Robbins, who we know most well from Shawshank Redemption. Ian Glenn, he played Jorah on Game of Thrones. I think he also played Bruce Wayne on Titans. And then Common, we know mainly as a rapper, but he's been in a lot of movies as well. All of these people are listed as being in this show, but did not appear in the first episode. So there's apparently a lot of new and important and prominent characters that we have yet to be introduced to. Maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, but I'm already wondering if we're going to see either a more significant than 2 years time jump, or if there are going to be like a lot of like non-silo locations where we may see other characters. I can't imagine the entirety of this show is going to take place in this silo. But then at the same time, if I assume that it's not, then I got to already feel like the premise is not true at the very start of the show. Like the premise, they're saying you can't go outside. It's too toxic. And I'm like, well, I don't believe that the whole show is going to take place in the silo, so they got to go outside, right? Which means that inherently the you can't go outside thing ain't true. So there's a little bit... there's a lot left to discover as far as like what the reality is within this silo world, and what the reality is going to be for us as viewers as to what we're going to see. I kind of feel like a show that entirely takes place within this silo. A lot of like, it's very bland, lots of concrete. A lot of the places look the same. It's very generic. Like it's something that like I feel like a lot of people aren't going to be able to stomach for an entire first season, let alone several seasons. So I kind of feel like they're going to have to get out of the silo, but they're going to have to find a more creative way than just, they were just fucking with you, as to why they get out of the silo. And then also, I feel like you still are going to have to keep people in the silo. So the people who go out of it is going to have to be like a handful, and they're going to have to be the only ones that know it's possible and sneak out or something, because if it becomes known to everyone that it's fine outside, then the show is over. Everyone leaves the silo, and then that's it. So I'm really curious as to where this is going long term. But that first episode, I found it pretty interesting, pretty compelling, and I'm ready. I'm in. I'm ready to watch it. So let's talk about the episode real quick. Like I said, these broad details that I'm not going to go too deeply into. Like I said, Apple's been crushing the sci-fi game. Foundation was probably one of my it was one of my favorite shows of 2021. Severance was one of my favorite shows of 2022. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be one of my favorites of 2023. But this first episode does a lot of world building, and your enjoyment of the episode and probably the show as a whole is going to rely on how interesting you find this world and the show's central premise. But I think what they've laid out in the first episode, at least for me, is pretty interesting, pretty compelling, and I'm in on it. But I can't tell you everything that happens in the first episode without spoiling it, but I do feel like you can watch this one and you're gonna know whether or not this is a show you fuck with or not. And I know that there's a whole lot of ways in which it can and likely will expand, but the episode one is gonna do a lot to let you know if this is a show that's for you or not. But basically, all these people live in this underground silo. They don't know why. They don't know how they ended up there. And despite there being screens around the silo that purport to show all the devastation outside, they don't really know what's above ground either. They believe it's toxic and desolate above ground, but they don't know. And we learned that there was some sort of rebellion 140 years ago that was squashed. And Freedom Day, the day that this episode is named after, on Freedom Day, they celebrate the squashing of this rebellion. And from what I can gather, the rebellion was essentially people who wanted out of the silo. They don't say why, but I'm going to assume it's probably because they didn't believe they needed to be there in the first place. Like, you know how there's always going to be people who would be like, oh, the government said this, but I don't trust the government, so that must not be true. Like, I'm sure the rebellion was probably people who were like, I don't believe what they're telling me about how unlivable it is outside, so fuck it. All of us who don't believe, we're going to gather up and we're going to get the fuck out of here. That's probably what happened. But they don't give the why in this first episode. But these rebels, they tried to escape, which again, given what they believe, opening the silo will put everyone within it at risk. They were stopped or defeated, depending on your perspective. And this victory, again, depending on your perspective, is what's celebrated on Freedom Day. They also say that despite being defeated, the rebels managed to destroy any information detailing the history of pre-silo times. And that ends up the history of the history of the silo and the times before it, before the 104 years, is a big talking point in this first episode. But we also learned there's a faction of people, like I just mentioned about the rebels, present day, who don't believe the Freedom Day story, which is why I believe that that's what prompted the rebels to try to escape. They don't believe the outside is unsafe or that the rebels even destroyed the history. They question whether or not the rebels in this rebellion even happened at all. And if this is all just some sort of story that's used as a form of control to keep them from wanting to even leave the silo in the first place. There's some evidence that's uncovered that leads to Rashida Jones' character to start to question the validity of what they've been told. And that's pretty much all of the world building I'm really willing to divulge without moving into a realm that I would consider spoiling. So I'm going to stop there as far as laying out the premise. But I feel like in a very bare bones kind of way, I did give you guys a pretty good idea of the premise, at least as it looks after one episode. But, you know, decisions are made, things take place, and we begin what seems to be the journey of finding out the real story behind the silo. And I'm certain that we've only peeled back like the first of many layers as it pertains to this show. But I found this first layer super interesting, and I'm totally in with both feet on this show. And admittedly, I'm a sucker for good sci-fi. This is my shit. This is my lane. I was almost certainly gonna like this. Like it has to be pretty bad for me to not like it, but bad sci-fi is really bad sci-fi. But I mean, good sci-fi is hard to get, you know, and when you get it, it's a joy to, you know, spend time, you know, to enter these entire worlds that have been constructed for you that are just so detailed and lush. And it's just like there's so much work that's been being put into like a good sci-fi property, building an entire history for this world. And I'm just super excited to learn more about the world of Silo and experience it with you guys. So I'm going to check out episode 2, like I said, get a full spoilery video up. I'm probably going to talk about some shit that I didn't talk about in this video and that one as well. I'll get that up sometime next week. Highly unlikely I'll get it up over the weekend. Highly likely I'll watch it over the weekend, but highly unlikely I'll get the video up. I think Tuesday is the most likely day that I will get the video up for episode 2. Monday is gonna, I'll be getting Succession and Barry up on Monday, so it's not looking good for Monday. So Tuesday's probably the day I'll get an episode 2 video up, and then I'll see you guys weekly on Fridays for the duration of the season. I'll be dropping videos with this same day as Yellow Jackets on Friday. Whichever one comes out first is going to be the one that gets the most plays. So if you want to see me talk about Silo first on Fridays, make sure this video in episode 2 gets some plays. Share it to your social media shit. Tell people you fuck with me. And I'll see you guys later this week for episode 2. Early next week for episode 2 and next Friday for episode 3. And until then, peace.